regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with me on the program today. You know, we have been doing Mondays with Mark, talking with a friend, Mark Walters from Armed American Radio. We're doing Thursdays with Mark, at least today. We're going to do Thursdays with Mark. And Mark Walters is going to be with us talking about, of course, the election results, what it means for gun owners and Second Amendment advocates. In fact, this is a beefy conversation, a great discussion. Let's get right to it. So take a look and a listen to our talk with Mark Walters. Mark, thanks for coming on the show. It's good to see you, sir.
Thanks for having me, Cam. Pleasure. Let's gloat a little bit today. Why not?
The gloating, I'm guessing, started, about 3 o'clock Wednesday morning and has continued ever since, right?
How do you feel?
I feel good. I really do. I mean, this was, we talked about this before the election, but this was so important. I mean, just thinking about, and I just got through writing a piece about Trump and what his election is likely to mean for Joe Biden's executive orders, including those that are being challenged in court. And, you just think about the sea change, right? What could have been over the next 4 years under Kamala Harris, this continued Larry Keane. I talked to Larry Keane on yesterday's program. And he talked about the whole of government attack on the firearms industry that we've seen over the past 4 years. But it's also a whole of government attack on gun owners, right? And that would have continued. We would have seen more executive orders. Just a couple of months ago when Biden announced this emerging firearms threat task force, and they're supposed to have 90 days to come up with a report on what to do about auto sears and switches and 3D printed guns. We'll see what that report says, Mark, but I think that was the first step towards trying to treat semi-automatic firearms as machine guns and to try to put semi-automatic firearms under the auspices of the National Firearms Act, right? That alone is now DOA, right? It is not going anywhere. And that's just one thing that has changed, one aspect of our right to keep our arms that is far more secure today than it was on Tuesday morning.
It absolutely is. I'm glad you brought up the auto sears and the semi-autos. You and I, if you remember, we talked going back as much as a couple of years ago. You and I talked about under the auspices of the bump stock ban, if you recall that. And if I remember our conversation correctly, and I'm pretty sure I do, that you can go out and find YouTube videos of people bump firing a weapon without a bump stock, using rubber bands, belt loops, fingers, etc. And you and I discussed on the show at that time, they're going to look at that and say, oh, see, it's not just bump stocks. We've misclassified these semi-automatics all along. And you're absolutely correct. That's exactly what that was. That's where that was going. And it is DOA, and it's a great thing for gun owners as well. But I feel good for everything that you just mentioned, plus a little bit more. I had faith in Americans. My wife she thought that there's no way the Democrats are going to let him win. And a lot of people felt that way. It's just not going to happen. And I said, you got to have faith in people. You really do. And if you recall the last couple of times on your show, I held my wallet up. I said, this is what people are going to be voting, right? And we talked 312 electoral votes. Well, Arizona's not in yet. Nevada's not in yet, but they will be. And when they do come in, it will be 312 electoral votes. It wasn't a really hard prediction to make. It was a fun prediction to make. If you have faith in people, people are just as fed up as you are. Now, one area that has hated us for years has been media, as far as gun owners are concerned. I don't know that the mainstream press, I don't know what happens to the mainstream press after this election, but I think they're going to be required to tone down some of their rhetoric at least. I don't know. I'd like to know how you think about that when it comes to gun owners. Will they tone it down somewhat?
I think that they should. So it's interesting that you bring this up because I'm not on Twitter. I'm really not on social media. The one kind of social media platform that I lurk on, I'll lurk on Twitter a little bit, but I spend more time on Reddit, generally just reading people's comments, right? I like the fact it's a little bit longer. You're not confined to, so many characters. And I've run across so many Democrats and liberals over the past couple of days, Mark, who said, I didn't realize I live in an echo chamber until Tuesday night. I didn't realize that, I've made fun of conservatives for their echo chamber, right? For just listening to Fox News or Newsmax, but I'm living in an echo chamber too. And I'm glad that those folks actually realize that, right? And I think that you're right. There needs to be a reckoning. And you saw that a little bit like with Jeff Bezos telling the Washington Post editorial board, look, we're not going to do an endorsement here. And in his message, he talked about we need to represent all of our readers, right? Readers need to see themselves in our editorials, in our opinion columns. And if you're on the right, you're not getting that. You've got Jim Garrity, who's a good friend of mine. And then you've got the, so-called conservative Jen Rubin, right? And that's about it at the Washington Post. So, I think that you're right. That's what the media should do, right? We should be seeing columns from people like Mark Walters in the Washington Post or the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. We should be seeing pro-gun voices on a regular basis in mainstream media. Yeah. And if they don't take that step, if they don't recognize that, okay, you know what, we're the ones who are out of touch and we need to fix that. I think you're just going to see a continued demise, not only in the trust for the mainstream media, but in their ability to put out a product, right? Because their audience is just going to disappear.
I don't know if they're smart enough to figure it out. Bezos definitely is. I'm glad you mentioned him. He's on the right track. Bezos sees the writing on the wall here. The fact that he didn't make an endorsement, the fact that he stood up to employees within his own company, the fact that he stood up to, of course he owns it, he didn't have to stand up, but he took a position and said, not going to happen, guys. We're not going to do this. He understood, I think, that shift. And could we be seeing the Washington Post make a more neutral shift here? I think we could be. Yeah, there is hope for these people. ABC and NBC, so we can CBS. I don't know. MSDNC and CNN are completely gone. Forget it.
Yeah,
they're digging their own grave. But when you're talking about the three major networks, I think this was a reckoning. I think it was. And as it comes to gun owners, it's not just a political thing. It's not just a propaganda machine. It's got to encompass everything. It's got to be the way they treat any conservative cause. Of course, gun ownership falls into that for the most part. Yes, lots of liberals own guns. Good for you. I'm glad you are. I'm good for you. But it was good. It's encouraging to hear what you said about Reddit, because that means you're dealing with honest people. Those are people you can have a conversation with, right?
Yeah.
You can't have a conversation with somebody that can't get out of that echo chamber. Look, I know my show's an echo chamber. It's designed to be an echo chamber. That's why I did it, because there's enough of the other side all day long that I wanted people to be able to come into the echo chamber and hear 3 hours of our point of view, not theirs. Okay. But it's designed to be that way. I'm not a news outlet. It's our discussion. But the media that portrays themselves as news has done so much damage to this country that I'm hopeful that they fix themselves, but I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. I think you're right. It's going to be on a case by case basis, and there are some lost causes. I'll tell you one of the things that I would love to see, and I think conservative media has done a better job of this. You look at the big three networks, right? They're all New York, DC, right, based. You look at Daily Wire, for example. They're in Nashville. They're not based in the Acela corridor. Even me, Mark. I mean, when we were doing NRA News, I moved from Oklahoma to the DC suburbs in 2004, and by 2012, I felt like I was losing touch, because DC and even the DC suburbs is just not what most of the country is. And, when we decided to move to outside of Farmville, Virginia, at first, I didn't talk to my bosses at NRA News. I went ahead and I moved, and I commuted back and forth for a year and a half. I rented a 10 by 10 room in a home in Alexandria, and I lived there, during the week, and I would come home on the weekends, and maybe I'd drive home on a Wednesday night and come back on Thursday morning. And when I ended up talking to my bosses and said, look, I have this idea for a studio in Farmville. The whole idea was the media isn't paying attention to real America. The media isn't in these small towns. So why don't we go into these places where gun owners live, where the support for the Second Amendment is strong? Because this is what real America looks like, far more than Alexandria, Virginia. And I was glad that my bosses thought it was a good idea. We're still here, 10 years later. But I'd love to see these networks open up a bureau in Oklahoma or in Utah, right? Get out of your bubble, Because if every one of your reporters, every one of your producers, everybody in that news organization is living, and commuting to New York City or to Washington, D.C.,
Sure.
you don't understand what's going on in the rest of this country. And that is a huge problem for the media. So that's part of it, right? They've got to get out of their bubble.
Well, their bubble is a big one. And, I'm hopeful that they're beginning to see some writing on the wall, because you look at Rogan's podcast, you look at shows like this,
Mm-hmm.
American radio. There's a lot of different outlets, and a lot of different people get their media from other sources now, and they're just not as relevant as they were. Having said that, let me cut over to guns just briefly. It's kind of all ties to the media, because the media never gives us a fair shake. They never have. I'm hopeful that changes a little bit. Do you see? And I'll be the one asking you questions.
I know. I love this.
I love doing this. I ask questions for a living. I can't.
I got some for you too, but it's all right.
Do you see Trump rolling back some of these executive orders? And what do you think? What's he going to do with the Office of Gun Violence Prevention? What role do you see Alan Gottlieb playing here? Because I know he's going to play a role. What do you see happening at ATF? I mean, I'm not asking you. I'm asking these out there to the cloud. And talk about these issues. A lot going to be happening here in the next several months.
Right. Absolutely. In fact, one of the stories that I wrote earlier today is, what is Trump's DOJ going to do with these prohibited persons cases? Right. I feel pretty good that Trump's going to end the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. In fact, I was talking with Larry Keane yesterday. I said, I'd like to see that replaced with a White House Office of Responsible Gun Ownership, and have an office that's actually dedicated to restoring a culture of lawful gun ownership rather than trying to make gun ownership taboo, right? I'd love to see efforts like that directed for the White House. That'd be a perfect place for Alan Gottlieb and other 2A advocates, right? I think we will see the Biden administration's executive orders rolled back. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Trump just undoes them all, not just the gun regulation, but just comes in. Everything Biden did via executive action for the last 4 years, it's done. We're not going to do that anymore. But then you get right. But then you get into cases like, Garland versus Range, right? Where the DOJ says Brian Range, who was convicted of a misdemeanor offense in Pennsylvania 30 years ago for falsifying his income on a food stamp application. But because that was a misdemeanor punishable by more than a year in prison, Brian Range lost his gun rights. He got probation. He never went to jail for that. But for 30 years, he's not been able to legally own a gun. DOJ is defending that decision. Will the Trump DOJ defend that decision? Will the Trump DOJ defend the prosecution of Patrick Darnell Daniels, who was sentenced to 46 months in federal prison because he admitted that he smoked marijuana 14 times a month while he owned a gun? I don't want to see the Trump DOJ defend the prosecution of Patrick Darnell Daniels. I don't want to see the Trump administration defend the prosecution of Brian Range or defend the deprivation of Brian Range's rights. So let me ask you, do you think that a Trump administration is going to reverse course on not just, things like who's engaged in the business of dealing firearms, but actually, take that position where, okay, if you're going to take away somebody's gun rights, they actually have to be dangerous, right? They've got to at least be convicted of a violent crime. They have to continue to be a danger to themselves or others. You can't just say, well, because you were convicted of some nonviolent offense, you lose your gun rights forevermore.
Yeah, to answer your question, I think he does reverse course in both of those cases that you just cited. Because let's take a look at Donald Trump's history with the DOJ.
Right.
Donald Trump understands what the DOJ can do to you if they want to. Let's look. We could even go into the J6, right? I don't know if Trump's going to pardon everybody. I believe he will pardon some. There's no question about it. But I think he reverses course on that. And, when you talk about not just that, prohibited persons, I don't know how far he's willing to go right out of the box. And the reason I say that is because he's coming into Washington with a very clear mandate right now. A very clear mandate. One that's got Jimmy Kimmel's head popping like a zit. I love it. But he's got a very, very clear, very strong mandate from the American public. And, I was a guest on another show earlier before ours today and was asked the question about how I think he's going to govern. Cam, I believe in divine intervention. I think the nation had to go through these 4 years so that we could see what we were really, truly up against when the left actually did what they wanted to do. And make no mistake, they didn't complete the job. They were going for the kill shot. Had she won, they'd have put the boot on our necks There's no question about it. So I'm not in any mood to make nice with these people whatsoever. Trump train's open for business. Hop on, come on. But you have to make changes, not us. You don't like it, get off, don't get on, do what you want to do. But I'm not extending an olive branch to you because I know you would have put your boot on my throat. Maybe that day will come, but it will depend on their actions. Now, having said that, how is Trump going to govern going forward in some of these gun cases? He ran a pretty strong campaign on defending gun rights. He made that position very clear. He's had the DOJ up his tail for years now. So I think you're going to see Donald Trump, a different Donald Trump, ready to govern this country now in a way that he probably wouldn't have been able to do it. He won the previous 4 years, which he wasn't supposed to do, so the nation could see where we are and put him back in office now, much more mature, with a mandate, a clear mandate, knowing who to put in, knowing who not to put in, and not having to worry about another election, which has got the left all crazy. But I think he's figured out now how to govern this country. And it's going to be fascinating to watch what that means to our gun rights going forward. What does it mean to the attacks on the industry? What does it mean to gun violence prevention? What does it mean? Will there be no other cases? Will others not file cases? Will the attacks on the gun industry cease? The answer to that question is no. The left is going to continue to come after us.
Yeah.
But it's a complete picture now. So it's going to be a fascinating 4 years, not just for gun rights, of course, but for gun rights in particular. Are we going to see the industry begin to get a little bit healthier financially? Are we going to see sales go up? Right? Are we going to see an expansion of our rights post-Bruin now with a Trump DOJ? Imagine that. So, the future looks really good right now. I'm feeling really good. Yesterday was the best terrible hangover I ever had in my life.
All right, I want to ask you one more question here, and I'm not going to ask you what you think will happen. I'm going to ask what you would like to happen. When I went to bed on early Wednesday morning, our partners at DDHQ, they had their version of the New York Times Needle, right? And I think that at that point when I went to bed, Trump had like a 90% chance of winning the presidency. Republicans had a 100% chance of taking the Senate, but at that point it looked like Democrats might take back the House. Now I think it's going to be, I think Republicans have a really good shot of keeping a hold of the House, having that trifecta. And that raises the question, do you nuke the filibuster in the Senate to pass things with 51 votes? You say no.
No, because that's going to be used against us at some point in the future.
I happen to agree with you. I'm glad that you said that. I was curious to get your thoughts. I saw Costas Moros, who I respect a great deal. He is burn it down, man. Let's nuke the filibuster. Let's pass things with 51 votes. And I'm with you. I think that is there for a reason. And even if it means, look, you don't repeal the NFA, you don't repeal Gun Control Act because, you're going to need to get half a dozen Democrats to go along with that. Even if it means you don't get national right to carry reciprocity, that safeguard of the filibuster, in my opinion, is necessary. And, I know Democrats said, we were going to nuke the filibuster to, codify Roe versus Wade into law. Well, that might be one of the reasons why they lost. Right. Yeah. Because I don't think the American people, you talk about Donald Trump's mandate, and I think he does have a mandate, but I don't think the American people were voting to nuke every institutional protection that's in D.C. Right. They were voting, as you say, with their wallet. They want to feel secure in their jobs. They want to feel secure in their homes. They want to feel secure in their rights. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, and again, you get rid of the filibuster, you're not secure, because as soon as the Democrats get power again, then holy crap, they undo everything, right?
It would be a total mess. But there's a little way to go deeper into this too. And here's why I don't think it's a good idea. Because he does have a mandate right now. Look, the wokeness we've seen, the craziness we've seen from the left, I believe that there are some moderate Democrats. Not every Democrat in Washington, D.C. is a far left lunatic goon the way their party has been reflected over the last few years. I can promise you, and I don't know who they are by name, I could guess a few, but I believe there are some Democrats right now very relieved that DEI is over, that the stranglehold of the far left on the nation is over, so that they can get back to, and by saying that, I'm not giving anybody a pass for how they have voted. But I have a feeling you'll see some Democrats begin to work with Republicans right now in some of these areas, including guns, where they wouldn't have before, which could mean that nuking the filibuster is not necessary, because that's the way the government is supposed to function. That's why the filibuster is there. That's why you need those majority votes in the Senate to pass legislation. However, if I'm wrong about that, could very well be wrong about that, the Democrats just continue to dig in and continue to allow the far left to rule their party. Well, I still don't think we should look at it, but it's going to be talked about. It will become a topic of discussion. Why don't you do what they want to do?
It's interesting that you talk about the Democrats. This gives those moderate Democrats an opening to be more moderate, to say, you know what, I'm going to buck Chuck Schumer. I'm going to buck Nancy Pelosi or whoever the House Minority Leader is if Democrats lose control of the House or don't take back control of the House. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Mark, we had the Blue Dog Democrats, right? That was an actual block of Democrats in Congress. A lot of them were A-rated by the NRA. They were, pro-union, but they weren't crazy. They weren't AOC. They weren't Nancy Pelosi, right? And you're right. As the Democrat Party went further to the left, there was no room for those Blue Dog Democrats. And eventually the voters in their district said, we can't keep electing you, because even if we like you, you go to DC and then you kowtow to the party line, and that doesn't represent us anymore. So, the right to keep bear arms is a nonpartisan right. It's not a right of the right. It's not a right of Republicans. It's not a right of conservatives. It's a right of we, the people. And I think it's more secure when both major political parties are willing to support and protect and safeguard that right. So I hope that this election not only is a wake-up call for the media, I hope that it is a wake-up call for Democrats, and we start to see pro-gun Democrats run for office. Not I support the Second Amendment, but Democrats, but I support the Second Amendment and Democrats running for office in the next, 2 and 4 years.
I don't think it's going to go quite that far. I would like to see that happen, but I don't think it's going to go quite that far. I think what you're going to see is less resistance to the against our right to bear arms. I think you'll see less resistance there because of Donald Trump's mandate, and because that's what the people wanted. Oh, look, the Democrat Party's in disarray right now. They took an ass kicking. Let's just be frank. All right, it was handed to them on a platter, and they're going to have to respond accordingly to that if they want to be relevant at all. Particularly, at least for the next 2 years, it's looking like, right, till the next elections, midterms anyway. But yeah, I just don't think. I think that view you had, sure would be nice, but I think that's a little bit overly optimistic.
It may take a couple of election cycles, and you'd have to find candidates who'd be willing to buck the national party, right? And that means you're going to struggle with donors. I mean, it is an uphill climb, right, to have a pro-gun Democrat, an actual pro-gun Democrat, run in this environment. But man, I mean, again, you look at the numbers, and rural America, suburban America. You're right. It was an ass kicking. There were counties in southwestern Virginia where Kamala Harris got 15% of the vote. 15%. Donald Trump 85%. Right. I mean, that is an ass kicking. So if you want to be competitive in those districts, if you want to claim to be able to represent Americans and not just the elites, not just urban Americans, you got to go where those folks are. And where those folks are is, I'm standing up for my Second Amendment rights. You're not taking my guns away, and I'm not voting for a candidate who is. I think they figured that.
I think they figured that out. And my history with Virginia. I have family still living in Virginia. Lived in Midlothian for a while. My parents did anyway. They lived up in Reston and Herndon. I graduated college in Radford University in Southwest Virginia, and lived in Virginia Beach for a number of years. So I've been all over the state, and where you live is very beautiful. I love the Farmville area. It's gorgeous. You're in a great place. I wouldn't have wanted to make the commute to Alexandria back and forth, but
it sucks. But you do it.
It's a lot of work, ladies and gentlemen. It's not the commute you want to take. But when I looked at the Southwest map, Southwest Virginia map during the election, I believe it was Roanoke area went blue in the previous election. It was all red this time around, if I'm not mistaken.
I think even Radford went red this time. And, again, Radford's a college town, so it's a little dot of blue surrounded by red. But I think even Radford went red this year.
Here's what that tells me about gun owners. That tells me that gun owners came out to vote in those rural areas where they might not have, or clearly didn't in the last election. And I do want to say this about Virginia, I think is fascinating. when Trump cleans house in Washington, D.C., and he's going to, because you and I mean, you can probably smell the paper shredders overheating right now in Farmville. I'm beginning to smell them in Georgia, so you probably can smell them up there. The point that I'm making with that is, all kidding aside, is after he cleans house in Washington, and he's going to, that is going to change the demographic of that Northern Virginia area. Now, Virginia hadn't been called until late. You're looking at a 1%, 2% in Virginia with that area. Once he cleans that house, I'm going to make a prediction right now. Virginia goes red the next presidential election. And I think you see it stay red for a long time to come after Trump gets done doing to Washington what he's going to do and fixing that problem. Boy, that's a great thing for Virginia. I think you're going to see that state make that move. It's because that's been the stain up in your state has been in that Northern Virginia, those 4 counties up there.
Yeah.
So
again, one of the reasons why we moved was I got sick of having my representatives not represent me. All right. Listen, Mark Walters, we could do this for hours. I really appreciate you coming on the program. Always love talking with you, man. I appreciate it when you give me the invite here on Armed American Radio. Remind folks how they can listen to you every day, and then the Big Monster Cast on Sunday night.
Yeah, Sunday nights, 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern, 5 to 8 p.m. Pacific. You can do the math in between there, wherever you're at. Pick up your time zone. ArmedAmericanRadio.com. And every Monday through Friday, I'm live from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern time, Monday through Friday, 4 to 5 Eastern, 1 to 2 Pacific. Everything at ArmedAmericanRadio.com. Click listen live or click watch live, and we'll see you on the radio. Thank you, Cam.
Absolutely, brother. We'll talk to you again soon. Mark Walters joining us here on Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My thanks again to Mark for joining us on the program, and looking forward to having him back again very soon. Probably won't have him back on Monday. It might have, because that'd be 2 shows in a row. But we will get back to Mondays with Mark, I promise, here in the very near future. Right now, though, let's get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We'll start there with a case out of California. Headline, documents show Bart stabbing suspect has long criminal record. Prior victim reacts to recent arrest. Bart is the Bay Area Rapid Transit. It is a gun-free zone, by the way. It is not a violence-free zone. But if you have a concealed carry license in California, you are still not allowed to carry on a BART train. And that means that a 54-year-old woman who was recently stabbed on a BART train could not carry a firearm to protect and defend herself. This happened just after 8 a.m. a couple of days ago. San Francisco Fire Dispatch audio indicating a victim who turned out to be a 54-year-old woman had a cut to the throat, and that BART police were on the scene. ABC 7 in San Francisco said that the BART police announced the arrest of a 34-year-old man after he was spotted at a Fruitvale BART station on Sunday and then taken into custody. They're not naming the suspect, they say, under ABC 7 news crime guidelines because he had not yet been formally charged, but the documents show that he has a lengthy felony criminal history dating back to 2006 when he was a minor. Now, among this guy's convictions, in 2004, he served 7 years, or sentenced to 7 years, for a 2014 home invasion robbery in Vallejo, California, which he used a stolen vehicle. The homeowner, who was a mom of twin babies at the time, spoke to ABC 7 News on Monday. She said she hadn't heard of the suspect's latest arrest. She said it was extremely scary, very, very scary. Knowing what we went through a long time ago with our robbery, I'd really hoped it was going to be the end of the story with this person, that they would either be in jail for a long time or somehow rehabilitated. That wasn't the case. In fact, after that individual got out of prison for the home invasion robbery, documents show that in 2023, a judge sentenced him to 1 day in jail and probation for what ABC 7 describes as a series of charges, including first-degree robbery and sale of ammunition to a minor. I mean, California has universal background checks for ammunition purchases. We're told that that's a very serious offense. Robbery is supposed to be a pretty serious offense too, right? But a day in jail and then probation? And then in April of this year, the suspect faced 29 charges, including a violent robbery allegedly committed back on January the 8th. ABC 7 says he was still on probation at the time, but the case was dismissed as part of a plea deal. District Attorney's Office in Alameda County, by the way, the Alameda County DA just recalled on Tuesday, told ABC 7 that the suspect was released in July of this year due to, quote, good conduct credits. Yeah. California voters overwhelmingly approved Prop 36 on Tuesday. That increases the penalties for retail theft for some drug offenses. And that's a great start. But again, when you've got violent offenders who basically have a criminal history, again, that stretches back not only their entire adult life, but into their teenage years as well. And they are still getting these sweetheart deals where a day in jail, not even a day in jail, just charges dismissed and probation in return for, again, pleading guilty to a violent offense. No consequences whatsoever for violent criminals. Yeah, California still has a way to go. Step in the right direction with Prop 36, but not nearly enough. Today's Armed Citizen story from West Virginia, where police in Cabell County say a homeowner shot a person in an alleged burglary. Don't have a lot of details about this case. We'll hopefully get more information here in the days to come, but happened just before 1 o'clock this morning in Ona, West Virginia, in Cabell County. According to Cabell County authorities, the sheriff says that a suspect shot in the legs by a homeowner who reported a burglary. Suspect taken to the hospital with undisclosed injuries. Don't know the current condition of that individual, but at this point, again, police considering this to be an act of self-defense there in West Virginia. So like I said, we'll keep our eyes on any more information as that story develops. Finally today, our good deed of the day, in the right place at the right time. Willing and able to do the right thing at great risk to themselves and their vehicle. A driver in Colorado helped stop a hit-and-run suspect who was wanted for crashing into a school bus full of kids. Thankfully, none of the kids were injured. This was in Aurora, Colorado, which has, again, it's more than its fair share of crime these days. According to CBS News in Denver, there were children on this Cherry Creek school bus at the time of the crash, but again, no kids injured on Wednesday afternoon. According to the Colorado State Patrol, troopers dispatched to this hit-and-run crash. When they arrived, they were talking to kids, talking to the school bus driver. Aurora police, though, were also investigating the same suspect in another hit-and-run that had taken place a couple of blocks away. Officer said the suspect, a 23-year-old man, ran a red light and struck a Nissan Xterra. Witnesses told police that he was trying to get away from the crash scene. And that's when officers say another driver, who's just an individual in a pickup truck and a witness to that second hit and run, followed the suspect's vehicle and then struck the vehicle to immobilize it and to keep the suspect from getting away. CBS Denver says officers took the suspect driver into custody at that time. The suspect driver was injured, taken to the hospital for treatment. Hopefully the Good Samaritan who used his truck to make that pit stop, uninjured and okay. And hopefully it's a very understanding insurance company as well, because I don't know that insurance covers you, and that's an intentional act to save others, to help law enforcement. But I would think that would be covered. I would hope that would be covered, but you never know. Sometimes you do the right thing, and these companies don't necessarily see it that way, right? So we'll keep our eyes open for any more updates on that story as well. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. Thank you again for being a part of the program. We'll be back on Monday, but don't forget to check out bearingarms.com throughout the day, throughout Friday and the weekend. We're, again, going to keep you up to date on everything going on in the world with your right to keep and bear arms. And I will remind you, actually, I'll let you know because I didn't have a chance to tell you about this yesterday. In celebration of Donald Trump's win this week, Town Hall Media has its best sale ever on VIP, VIP Gold, and VIP Platinum memberships. 74% off the membership price when you use the promo code POTUS47. 74% off. You get all kinds of great deals, exclusive stories, the ability to contact Town Hall Media writers directly, access to Town Hall TV, discounts at the Town Hall merch store. You'll also be supporting the independent pro segment of journalism that we're doing at Bearing Arms, and that's going to become critically important Because again, I don't think the mainstream media is going to learn its lessons. We were talking with Mark Walters earlier. Big tech still likely to censor the views and the voices of Second Amendment advocates. So your help really is crucially important, and now a great way to save on your VIP, or VIP Gold membership. Just use that promo code POTUS47 for 74% off your memberships. We'll see you back here on Monday. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.